Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Business of Property. I am your host, Cheryl Leong from Property Development Australia. At the Business of Property, we interview superstar guests in the property development space that share their expertise, ideas, their deals, their stories to help empower, build, and grow our community of property developers and investors across Australia. Hello to Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube land, everyone that's joining us today. Give me a shout out if you're here with us today in the comment section, wherever it is, or if you're watching the replay, #replay. So our guest tonight is a certified passive house designer and the founder of Gruen Eco Design, Simone Schenkel. And this is the second time we've had Simone. And the cool thing is that Simone has not long finished her own passive house. And I thought it'd be fantastic to be able to bring her on board to share that whole process. So Simone has this huge passion and experience and knowledge from the experience that she's had overseas in Germany to create Gruen Eco Design, where she works with her clients to create these not only beautiful design homes, but ensures that they are healthy, thermally comfortable, energy efficient, and resilient for future generations. So without further ado, I'd love to invite Simone down to the Business of Property dance floor. Simone, how are you?
Hello, thanks for the lovely introduction. Yeah, very excited to be here again. It has been a while.
Great. Yeah, it has. It has. Great to see you again. And I've loved sort of watching your journey, Simone, because I said you've just completed your own passive house, which I'm sure has been sort of a lifelong dream in your journey as well. So I'm definitely going to be talking about that. Simone, tell us a little bit about what it is that you do at Gruen Eco Design, so we can get, for those of us that haven't met you before, so we understand what it is that you do in your day-to-day.
Yeah, definitely. I'm pretty passionate about sustainable design, and I think everyone should have the right to live in a healthy, sustainable space, that doesn't cost the earth. It should be accessible to everyone. And obviously this can have many different forms and phases, and obviously people have different budgets. But I'm a big believer that no matter what your budget is, you can always make a home more energy efficient, more sustainable. There are always ways. It's not always, to spend on money. And as you have said, especially when you study architecture, I think it's always your dream to build your house. And it has been a long time coming. So we bought this block of land in 2017, thinking we would build really quickly. And then, issues came with Yarra Valley water and whatnot, many delays, and obviously COVID came. So it took quite a long time. We finally started construction in September last year and then finished in July this year. So the actual construction was fairly smooth, but everything in between was a bit of a nightmare.
Yeah. And so was that, for those, like I said, let's go back to Passive House 101. What is a passive house, and what's the definition of a passive house?
So the passive house standard is a very strict and rigorous standard, international standard for building highly energy efficient and sustainable homes. And maybe if I even go one step back, how energy ratings are done in Australia, or typically, or especially in Australia, the energy rating in our first rate 5, and like most people know, it's a purely theoretical rating. So it's done just on paper. And there is no quality assurance how the houses are actually built. So neither the builder nor the architect, designer, building surveyor, no one is actually checking what's happening. Versus the buildings, the passive house standard, it's a really rigorous standard that doesn't leave anything to chance. So everything is completely calculated and pre-assessed beforehand. And it takes a close look at, insulation, high-performing windows, air tightness, mechanical ventilation, and thermal comfort and health. So it's an all-around package. And like I said, nothing is left to chance, and it's really completely detailed beforehand. So even before you build the house, you know exactly kind of how it will perform once it's done.
Yeah. And then, so when we're doing sort of planning and things like that, and often we'll do, whether it's basics, and then we say, okay, it's six star rating or 7-star rating. how is that compared to passive house, or how is,
Yeah.
is that similar, or is it totally different?
Yeah, it's kind of comparing apples with oranges. You can't really compare it, unfortunately, because the problem is even a 6, 7, or even 8-star home on paper, on paper it might be performing well, but you don't know how the house is actually built like that. So, say if the,
Yeah.
if a bit of insulation is left out here and there, or what often happens is the builder might swap the windows because these windows are a bit too expensive, let's just go for something else. So often the actual houses are built much lesser standard than what's on paper. So I think there has been a study done a couple of years ago where they tested several 6-star homes. I'm not sure if it was 100 something, and most of them performed like 2 or 3-star homes, so it was actually quite shocking.
Oh, wow.
And so I think that's something that's completely different. And one thing though is as well, for everyone interested in building a more energy efficient or sustainable home, for whatever reason, even if you're not interested in going for passive house, I would recommend using the passive house calculation package, PHBP it's called, to optimize the energy efficiency. Because with that program, you can really look at, okay, what is my optimum insulation level? What is the most cost-effective window specification? You can optimize shading. Where do you need external shading? Where does it need to be adjustable? Where can it be fixed? Or is maybe internal enough, or maybe even a deciduous plant outside? And you can even get feedback on your heating system that you need. So it's a really good tool, and we recommend that to all our clients, even if they just do renovations, extensions, or like I said, if they don't want to go for passive house or don't have the funding. But it's still a really, really good design tool, and in my opinion, at least, much more reliable, or much more detailed than you get from the energy weighting.
Yeah. And so from that point where, most people are, whether they're living in a current home or renovating, what are some of the top points or areas that you would recommend to be able to say, at very least, consider this?
Yeah, well, definitely insulation. I mean, typically ceiling insulation is easy as, most places you can easily access it, and, you can even do it yourself, or, it's not expensive. Next one is floor insulation, which again, for most people is fairly easy.
And so what rating would you sort of be aiming towards?
So, I mean, in an ideal world, I would recommend ceiling insulation of R6.
Wow.
And I would say that the Australian standard, or the typical, according to the building code, is 3.5. And many builders will tell you, 3.5 is all you need. There's no point in putting in more, but it's actually not true. It's a big improvement. Similar with the floor insulation. So according to the code, typically 2 or 2.5 is sufficient. But if you're building for high performance, then I would recommend R4. So
okay, and then in terms of external walls as well.
Yeah. The walls is where it's getting tricky. Obviously, if you build new, it's much easier. But with existing housing stock, it can be difficult, because ideally, you need to insulate it between the battens, between your stud walls. And if you upgrade your internal plasterboard, or if you update an external cladding, it's fairly easy. But if not, it can be fairly cost intense, because you have to take off the plasterboard. And if you take off the plasterboard, you also have to redo the skirting boards and the cornices. And then your ceiling might collapse. And then suddenly you turn the house on its head, and it gets a massive job. So therefore, sometimes it needs to be a bit, you weigh up the cost. But I guess one big thing is that often people think, I can't do everything, so why bother at all? But I think it's important to realize every little bit counts. So let's say, for instance, if you redo the bathroom, and in the bathroom you have to take off the plasterboard anyway, then just insulate that wall. Or, if you just do one wall in a room, just do it. And with the others, just leave them. Or, similar thing, if you exchange one window because you're opening up a wall or something, just change that one window and make it better. And don't think, just because everything might be single glazing, we keep single glazing everywhere. So every little bit counts. And then the next step, which is fairly easy, is, obviously, replacing the windows would make almost the biggest impact, because the windows are always the weak point. Because what most people don't know is even a quadruple glazing. So even if you were to have a glazing with 4 layers, it would not be as good as an insulated wall. So the windows will always be the weak point, even more so if it's single glazing. So say, if you can afford it, try to go for double glazing where you can. But if not, at least, the windows can be weather stripped and sealed, and you can get different films to put on it that help a bit. But the actual sealing or weather stripping is fairly easy. Again, can even be a DIY job. And looking at things like self-closing exhaust fans, again, a fairly cost-effective option.
What exhaust fans was that?
Self-closing.
Yes. Okay. Yes.
In your kitchen or bathroom, it's just a hole. So that means pretty much all the heat that you're producing inside is just sucked out. Versus the self-closing ones, they're just closed when they're not in use. So that's also a big impact.
Yeah, absolutely. And going back to the ceiling again, and in terms of, say, you've got an existing ceiling cavity, is it merely adding extra bats on top to increase the R value? Is that as simple as that?
As simple as that. Sometimes if you have old beds and they are deteriorated, it might make sense to take them off first. If they're in really bad condition. But some houses that even fairly new houses, they might have some beds in between the buttons or between the ceiling rafters or something, and there might not be enough. Then you can just put something on top. It might just be for older houses. If they're really bad, then it might be better to take them off.
Yeah, and one of the things with passive house that I find it really interesting how you mentioned about making airtight as well, and that there's a lot of sort of calculations that you do at the front. Is there then at the end, in terms of getting the house certified, is there then another test at the end when it's completed to ensure that everything's tight?
Yeah. So the thing is, the certification process itself is a bit time intense, and adds a bit of money. But the thing is, if you go for the actual certification process, you have an external certifier who will scrutinize all the calculations, scrutinize all the drawings, everything the builder has done, because the builder has to prepare almost like a photo love story. So from every single detail, they have to do photos. So the builder checks it. And then there's also the final blower door test. So it's a machine that pressures, how airtight the house is. So all those things have to align, to make sure, that nothing has been missed.
Yeah. So, and apart from saying that you're a certified passive house and actually sort of experiencing the benefits of the thermal efficiency, are there any other benefits to that, being a certified passive house?
I think with the certified one, it's really the high quality assurance, that you have almost like a stamp. We have done this.
Yes.
But I think, even if you're not going for certification, I'm sorry if I'm repeating myself, but I still think, at least the initial calculations are very important to make sure your home performs right. Because especially at the moment in Australia, with all the humidity in New South Wales and in Queensland, there have been so many mold issues. And, mold is really, really dangerous. And the dangerous part is that typically by the time you see mold coming through your walls or somewhere, it's been there already for a long time. And often it might be many, many more spots. And mold can lead to a array of health issues, like asthma, allergies, and, it can be actually quite severe. And it has been an issue in Australia for quite a while already. And the problem is that it comes really slowly. So it's not that a house is built and you straight away see mold. So typically it might develop within 6 or 7 years. By that time, the builder's warranty has lapsed, and you're just left with the nightmare, with the aftermath. And the thing is as well, something what most people don't know is that we humans produce a lot of water, or a lot of humidity. So I just know the numbers for a 3-person household, but a typical 3-person household, just by breathing, showering, eating, cooking, produces around 8 liters of water a day. And back then, when I studied architecture in Germany, our building physics professor, he was quite a nerd. And he would always, say, oh my God, you can't have plants in your house. You can't have animals. It just produces too much humidity. You're creating, such a time bomb. And he was banging on, you have to ventilate 2 or 3 times a day, proper cross ventilation. So, we're not talking about
open up all the windows.
Yeah, so not a little awning window. We're talking about doors or windows on opposite side, casement fully open, and ventilate for 10 or 15 minutes. And seriously, who would ever do that? If it's a 20 degrees day or 18, you might.
But it's freezing.
Yeah, but if it's 10 degrees outside, you wouldn't. And if it's 40, you won't either. But the problem is the humidity is still there. And to some degree, we've been lucky a bit in Australia that our houses were, excuse my French, so shitty and so drafty that the humidity was just going out. So, there was a bit of mold sometimes, but not extreme.
Yes.
But now with all the regulations coming in about energy efficiency and, building more high-performing homes, because, energy prices are going up so much, we have to reduce our energy bills. And to some degree, the houses get naturally more airtight, so the humidity can't get out. And what's quite sad is, and if people listening in, if you're interested in it, just Google or research the 𝐒𝐤𝐸 building syndrome, because that's what has happened in New Zealand and what's happened in Europe, like 20, 30 years ago, when they went through the same. Suddenly they upgraded all their houses, and then suddenly people got mold everywhere, and people got really, really sick, which is why they introduced then regulations on, how to calculate the dew points, avoid, moisture buildup inside the building structure, and mechanical ventilation. So, in other countries, it's regulated. And it's a bit sad to see that, even though, it has been done before, that we are almost falling into the same trap. Or, creating homes that potentially can make us sick.
Yeah. And this is the point where I think it's really important, because it's not something that you can see. You can really see. I mean, obviously mold you can eventually see.
Yeah.
But the danger is that mold's already been happening in the background. And I used to wonder, there was a builder, they were a project builder that were from Japan, and I remember one of the offerings they had was a really high energy efficient home. They had this enormous machine, which was almost like a dehumidifier.
Yes, they're really important. And so one of our team, she actually lives in Queensland as well, and she was saying to some degree there was mold on her shoes in the morning inside. It was so humid, and they got a humidifier for inside the house, to help with this,
Yes. Yeah, the mold issue. So going back to your build and that journey, Simone, like, what were the main challenges that you had? Were there any sort of challenges in terms of the passive house design itself, or was it mainly planning challenges?
Good question. I guess, my partner as well is, studied architecture as well. So we were banging heads quite a bit. He wanted different things that I did. But I guess that can often happen with couples. I think that was the most challenging bit. In terms of design, I think there weren't too many challenges. So given that I've worked in this industry for such a long time, it's fairly easy to design for me a house that performs well, in a sense. So I knew that the house would perform well, and then it was just a matter of fine-tuning windows and shading and whatnot with the broker, making sure that we haven't missed anything. But the issues were massive issues with Yarra Valley water, because we have kind of almost a 3-meter wide easement running through our block. We needed over a year to get the build over easement approval. And what they approved in the end was kind of ridiculous. So according to our builder, he said if we would build the carport like this, it would just would crack and would collapse after a few years. And so we took it out of the permit, in order to get construction started. And we are in the house now for almost 3 months, and we still haven't sorted it yet.
Yeah, right. So you don't have a parking spot?
Oh, it's just gravel, we flattened out the side.
Yes.
But just here, and we engaged an external consultant who has several discussions with them, and we put in several applications. It's always refused. So that are some challenges. And I guess, like many people in the industry, material shortages and prices going up has been a bit challenging. But
sure. So what has your house been built out of? What materials?
So we use structural insulated panels. Which, for the people that don't know, it's kind of a prefabricated wall system that has 11 mil OSB on either side.
Almost like sandwiches.
Yeah, like sandwich panels, and then polystyrene insulation in the middle. And I know it's always a bit of a discussion in the industry, because obviously polystyrene isn't ideal, petrochemicals and whatnot. But to some degree, in my opinion, it's almost the most cost-effective option to build a high-performing home. So if someone said, the environment is most important for me, and, the health aspect and budget isn't a constraint, I would probably recommend going for CLT, cross-laminated timber with fiber insulation. So also a way of prefabrication that works fairly fast. Because as most people probably know, for once time is money and also labor is really expensive. So so we were really lucky with the structural insulated panels. So all the external walls and the roof are made out of structural insulated panels. The floor is a slab-on ground. And yeah, like I mentioned before, even though we built in the midst of COVID and we had even the 2-week shutdown and we had so many tradies, being sick with COVID and the flu and whatnot. So many delays, and we still managed it in 9.5 months. So I think that was
that's pretty good. That's
Yeah.
pretty good. And in terms of builders, because not every builder knows how to work with SIP panels, and you've been in the industry for a while, so you would know. Was maybe talk to our audience around being able, if you're wanting to use SIP panels, why it's important to have a builder that understands how to use them.
There are quite a few things to it. I mean, for once, if someone is interested in SIPS panels or even CLT, which can be quite cost effective if you're thinking about apartment buildings or something, or several levels office buildings, CLT gets really cost effective because it's much more lightweight than concrete, so footings get much less. So there are quite a few good applications. I would say if you have a builder you want to use and he has never used SIPS or CLT, it's not such a big drama as long as he's interested and keen. Because most of the SIPS manufacturer, or there's actually one SIPS manufacturer we often work with, they do SIPS and CLT and other materials. They actually have an installation team. So if you go with a company like that, they can, for the construction or for the installation, they send out their crew, and then the builder can work with them to learn it. And typically it's fairly easy and straightforward. So I would say if a builder has done it once, they can do it on the next job themselves. But that's fairly handy, that you can see it and learn it. But yeah, it's pretty easy. In terms of SIPS or CLT, though, I would say what's really critical to have a structural engineer that know what they're doing. Because we had in the past many times that an engineer said, we've done it before. And then suddenly you see the plans and it just does not make sense. Because how it works with especially structural insulated panels, that any studs or noggings or lintels, they're inside that panel, and even some whatever steel elements or things are integrated within those panels. And then if you get the plans from someone who's never done it, they have that completely separately, and then you have to start almost from scratch and have to educate them again. Versus a good option is if you find a panel manufacturer that have their in-house structural engineer. We kind of find that works best, at least have it all in-house. I think that's almost more important than having a builder who's done it before.
Yeah, definitely. And so it's important that it's designed obviously with the right materials, the specific materials in mind. And with your SIPs, were they sort of craned in, or how's the construction?
Yep. So they were craned in, and what goes really fast if you only have a single-story home, that can be done just in between 2 or 3 days or 4 days, really quick. It slows down a little bit if you do double story, because you would install the ground floor walls, and then in our case we just did a standard floor joist on top. So that took them a little bit longer, and then once the floor was in, they put the next level on top. Unless if you want to go really speedy, then you could put cross-laminated timber flooring or hebel flooring. There are some options to go, to make that prefabricated as well. But in our instance, we had investigated it a little bit, and it turned out that the standard construction was more cost effective. But I think that's something what I would encourage as well, everyone. If you want to build a high-performing home or using SIPS or CLT or something, definitely work with a builder early on and, look at costing, optimize things, same with structural elements, that really, we always see the best outcome if the structural engineer, the builder, and your designer architect, or, us work together and sort everything as a team. And obviously you keep the client involved, because in some instances, the client has to make a decision. For example, there might be a really big steel beam, whatever, in your living area, and that steel beam might be adding $20,000. But however, if you were to put in a little nip wall or a feature post, you might save the $20,000. But then it's up to the client to say, he might say, actually, the most important thing for us is to have this big open room. I'm happy to pay $20K. Or they might say, actually, we want to put a bookshelf here. Can we put in a nip wall? And, those little things,
Mm.
they can, in the overall budget, have a big impact. But, without those discussions, you would never know.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, SIP panels, they're quicker, they're more thermally efficient. Obviously, from a construction point of view, a lot neater because it's just sort of, so you have less wastage on the site itself. Why are we not using it as much?
Because it's still a bit more expensive. So if you look at a standard construction, it's still probably 10 or 20% more. It doesn't really take into account time savings, but if you typically talk with builders, it's still a bit more. It's not the most cost-effective way of building.
Yeah, so you just have to be able to sort of weigh up if you're constructing the speed of construction versus the cost of the materials, because I mean these products have been around for a long time, and it is sort of, I would say, a bit disappointing that we don't use it more in the industry because of like all the benefits there. So
yeah, what I would just want to add is as well that if you want to build a high performing home, and if you use a builder that has done many high performing homes, it's fairly easy. But if you build with someone who's never done it, it can actually be quite challenging because you have to approach building in a bit of a different way. And for someone who's never done it before, a SIPS house is fairly easy because the good thing is, the walls, the roof is highly insulative. There are no air gaps. It's really high performing. It's really hard to mess it up. So if someone has never done it before, it's a kind of a good starting point, or a bit more foolproof.
Yeah, and with the SIPs, you've designed the electrical and plumbing conduits into the design as well.
You can, but we try not to do that. So you can get conduits in it, but the difficulty with that is that you go through the airtight layer because the OSB itself is airtight. So ideally, we try not to breach that. So what it means is, in our house, kind of cable or water comes in once, is probably sealed up.
Yes.
And then internally, we create a little cavity. So we have a 30 mil or 45 mil batten, excuse me, and then all wiring or water, whatever, once in this cavity. And the beauty of that is suddenly you turn this SIPS house into a normal build. So any plumber, electrician can just work normally. You don't have to worry about penetrating an airtight membrane, that they're quite fragile. And the other good thing is, if you later on want to add a power point, you can just tap into the wall and get it out. Whereas if it's in a conduit, it's much more difficult.
Yeah, and that's probably one of the things, if you're looking at different types of building, like modular or whichever, it's not as easy to add power points like you say. And so, I mean, you've lived in the house for 3 months now.
Yep.
And how has it actually felt like compared to your other house, which wasn't?
I must say I was quite spoiled before because we had renovated our previous unit, so we're actually living in an 8.4 star home. So I think that the biggest difference for us, I think, is the quietness. So you barely hear anything from the outside, so that's quite different.
Yes.
So it's very quiet. The funny thing, though, is the house is so quiet that you get more aware of other noises, of your kids screaming and things like that.
That's right. Does it mean it keeps the screaming in?
Yeah, a bit of a funny side effect. We had at one stage our built-in fridge started vibrating really badly, and it was not a loud sound, but it was standing out like highlighted. So, oh my God, what are we doing here? Luckily it's sorted. So that's different, and it just really feels different, really calming, and fresh air and
Yeah, that's great. And I guess you don't know until you've lived in a house which is more thermally efficient how different it is on a really, really hot day or a really cold day, which obviously it gets cold in Melbourne.
Yes.
In terms of your heating and cooling, what are some of the options that you use?
Typically, by the time you build such a high-performing home, you only need split systems. But they don't run. Or let's say, if in a normal Australian home, if you had a split system, it would run, hot blowing air constantly in your face, and the air is swirling, and it feels uncomfortable. In our home, we have 2 split systems as well, but they run on very, very low. You put them on and they just put in a little bit of air, you don't feel the movement and the house just stays warm. But, I always recommend you need at least 1 or ideally 2 split systems, because, even a passive house or the most high performing home can get too hot or too cold, even if it's just the human in the picture. If you leave the door open too long, it can get cold. Or in summer, if you have the sun hitting your glass, your house will get hot, no matter how well performing the window is, if you have triple glazing. And so therefore, if you have the split system in the house, that can help to cover that a bit. But I know from people that have put in, say, a fireplace or something, because they really love fireplace, but they can't use the fireplace because the house is getting too warm, or that they have to open up all doors. So you have to be a bit careful with that. But yeah, typically, 1 or 2 split system, depending on the size of your house, is all you need.
Okay, so ducted air conditioning and all that, no, don't need it.
Don't need it. And then one thing as well, if people wonder a bit about the cost factor, so typically HRVs or heat recovery ventilation system installed, and I'm going to explain in a minute what it is about $15,000 installed. And then on top of that, like I said, you might need 2 split systems. So say 3, 6, you may be sitting at $20,000, $21,000, which sound like a lot of money. But if you were to put in, say, a ducted heating system, that's probably $6,000 or something as well. And on top of that, you still need 2 or 3 split systems, but typically they need to be bigger, so you would be spending more money there. Or if you were to think about evaporative cooling, that can easily be another $10,000. So you're almost getting, by the time you add up everything, you're almost adding at the same amount. But the difference is when you run your ducted heating and your evaporative cooling, they run all the time and you have fairly high energy bills.
Yes.
Versus the HRV itself only needs about 35 watts, like as much as a light bulb, a typical light bulb. And then, if you use the split system, it's barely anything. So with our place, we also have a solar panels on the roof, I think 6.6 kilowatt or something. And typically what we do is that during the day when the sun is shining, and even today we had a rainy day, there wasn't much sunshine in Melbourne, but even that little bit of sunshine covered to put on the split system a little bit. So today we only had 13 or 14 degrees in Melbourne, so we, was a bit cool. And, so the solar system was just paying for the heating, completely. So nothing really to add, which is good.
This is fantastic. Are you storing the energy as well?
No, not yet. We have made allowances, so we have put in, the cabling, everything for EV charger and for batteries, but we don't have an EV car yet. So therefore, it's just sitting in the wall, where the carport will be one day, hopefully.
When you get the carport, then you can have your nice EV sitting there as well.
But maybe just going back a step about the mechanical ventilation units, is also what that means. And that's really one of the almost the nicest or the most important things with the passive house, and or with a passive house. What it means is you get constant filtered fresh air into the house, so there are no pollen pollutants, or even in bushfire, it takes out the smokes and whatnot. So you get filtered fresh air into the house, and the HRV has a heat exchanger in the middle. So that means the cold air comes in, goes through a heat exchanger, and the warm air from the inside goes through that and pre-warms the air. So let's say if you have whatever, or pre-cools the air, vice versa, it works as well. So let's say you had 40 degrees outside and 20 degrees inside, and the incoming air would be cooled down to 22 degrees.
Yeah, okay.
Just by going through that system. And like I said before, it's only 35 watts. It's really low
and
energy.
that just runs all the time without you even. Yeah,
constantly. And the interesting thing is, people often wonder, will I feel a draft, or it's loud and noisy? You just can't feel it. You don't even feel a movement of air in the house. And funnily enough, I heard from a few people that they found that quite strange, that there's no air moving in the house. So many people put in actually a ceiling fence on very low, that they get a bit of movement in the room.
Yeah, right.
Because it's so, unusual to have, still air in the house.
Yeah, absolutely. So do you have fans in the house as well?
Only in our bedroom.
Okay, yeah.
But an interesting thing is, like you said before, many people in Australia are not used to being comfortable. or, comfortable homes. And I found it so interesting. And, you probably have spoken with people from Europe as well, Sweden, France, or Switzerland, and everyone just keeps saying, oh my God, I've never been as cold as I've been in Australia. For us, it's kind of
because we're not built for it.
Mind-blowing. And what I often find is that in Australia, there are often kind of two different types of people. So there are the ones that just complain about the high energy bills, but they just have the heater running all the time and, pay a fortune. And then you have the others that don't turn on the heater. They're freezing half to death. They're sitting inside with their beanies and with their puffer jacket and the Ugg boots, and they're complaining, oh my gosh, the house is too cold. But very rarely does question someone the status quo. People always think it's too hard, or they don't even, think it can be done. But often it can just be a few $100 or maybe a few $1,000s to update it properly, which would be quickly, paid back with energy bills. But what I found interesting as well, if someone, if it's about energy efficiency upgrades or making your home more energy efficient, people are always asking, what's my payback time? How long do I need to get the money back? But whoever asks, what's my payback time for my Caesar stone? Or what's my payback time for my natural stone bedrock? No one cares. And so I often wonder, why?
That's an interesting point there.
Yeah, so why is it suddenly so important that you have a payback time for thermal comfort? And I mean, it's one thing to get, payback on your electricity bills or something, that makes sense. But I think people don't understand the impact on your health or on your thermal comfort, so like even when we had renovated our unit back then, it just wasn't drafty, it wasn't cold anymore. So my kids could just crawl on the floor without being cold. I could eat dinner without a scarf because there was no draft at the window at my back. And it's just a completely different way of living. You just feel so much better. And, while, priceless maybe is the wrong word, you don't want to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars just to live like that. But I think that people should rethink a little bit, where is my money going? Or,
and
is
the value of it.
Yeah, is it worth us spending $10,000 or $20,000 extra on things like window insulation? And I think yes, because it gives back of the way how you can live and enjoy your house rather than being cold and frosty inside. You should be able to be comfortable in your house.
Yeah, and I think it's because of that you walk into a display home and you're wowed by what you see. Like it's visual, like you can see the beautiful kitchen, you can see the beautiful Caesar stone, but you can't see the window if it's thicker. When you can eventually hear it, but you sort of go, can I put up with it? So I know there is a shift in the mindset. And this is why I love having this conversation with you, and often around, like, I personally, we know it makes a difference. We know that we're using less heating and all of that. And you're right, electricity is getting so much more expensive, and the weather. How much rain have we had? Anyone that's in New South Wales at the moment, the floods and all of that, things are getting moldy. And so we've got to be able to consider building and designing these smarter homes and not thinking that it's costing me more, but thinking how it's actually bringing that extra value and benefit into our livelihoods as well. So I think that's fantastic.
Simone. And another thing, what I want to throw in the picture, if someone talks about, being a builder or someone in the industry, we're building this really energy efficient 6-star home. For me, the alarm bells goes on. Because, you have to consider 6-star is currently the absolute legal minimum standard. So that means, in theory, if someone puts in a little bit less insulation, what often happens, your house is substandard and illegal. It's an illegal home. So that means a 6-star home is by no means something special. It's the barely legal minimum that the builder doesn't have to go to jail. But now, if you think about it the other way, who would ever buy a car that just scrapes by and will keep you somewhat alive? People invest in the best car with the best airbags, the best brakes, and whatnot. It's just out of the question. It needs to be the best for the family. But when it comes to building a home, people somehow expect, or, it's kind of the norm, you're just happy with the minimum standard, and which is, again, sort of a mind shift, I think, that has to happen there.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Simone, tell us a little bit about your business and how you're able to help people who are looking to build, obviously developers as well, and the areas that you service in Australia.
Yep. Yeah, definitely. I mean, we do everything from really small projects to big projects. And the thing is, I'm a bit, maybe have a bit of a helper syndrome to some degree. So, I always want to help people make their home energy efficient, more sustainable. So we have some projects where client might have a budget of $50,000, $100,000, and we help them, the best way to insulate the homes, maybe change the kitchen or something, do bigger or smaller, renovation extensions. We work together with a few, developers where we do 2-3 townhouse developments, either, for themselves or as investment. We do working on a co-housing project, which is quite interesting, which will be 30 units built to Passive House standard.
Oh,
so that's
fantastic.
exciting. And and kind of everything in between. Work is starting to work a little bit in whatever more in the commercial space as well. Now that the team is getting bigger and we have a bit more resources, but so pretty much everything that's about, being energy efficient, sustainable, being, affordable is one passion, but also, there is a great space for bespoke, high-end luxury, sustainable design, because you have a bit more, option in terms of materials and finishes and whatnot. You can do amazing things. And one thing, it's actually a topic we spoke about quite a bit with the team and other people this week, is things that are available on the Australian market. If you talk about food or things in whatever, in hardware stores, people automatically think, this paint is available, so it's fine, or, this glue is available, it's fine. And people don't realize how toxic many of these things are. And many things in our hardware stores have been prohibited in Europe for over 30 years because they're so toxic.
Wow.
Which is quite shocking. And often, that the really healthy options are, not off-the-shelf products. You have to get them from somewhere else, or, you have to be a bit more inventive. So if a client has a bit more budget, or, is keen on those sort of areas, it's really exciting to work with clients like this, which we're lucky to have a few. But you can come up with some amazing homes.
It should be the standard, right? It should really be the standard, and I guess the push for affordability and high producing product, I guess, has, people don't really know the toxicity routine. I mean, we're getting more education around, obviously paint with less toxins. But just the other things as well. And again, it's an educational piece, which I know that you do quite a few sort of interviews and podcasts around that as well, which is fantastic. So anyone that's really, really interested in this space, where can they go? So you've got a Facebook group as well.
Yes,
right?
We have a Facebook group. It's a closed group, but pretty much everyone can come in. You just have to, join. It's the Gruen Eco Design Sustainable Living Tribe.
Yeah.
And most of our talks are in there, where we try to get, industry specialists in, and have different discussions.
Yeah, fantastic. So anyone that's keen to find out more about either building a passive house or just creating a more energy efficient home for your next home or your next project, reach out to Simone. It's been an absolute pleasure. So I can't wait. When I head to Melbourne, I'm going to hit you up to check out your house.
Definitely, you have to come. So we still have too many things in boxes, which I haven't opened up the house yet.
Yes.
But we are slowly getting there. We're slowly getting and you know how it is with delivery issues at the moment. Everything takes months and months, but we're slowly getting the house furnished.
Yeah, that's all right. It's all good. You'll eventually get there. Well, thank you so much for taking the time, Simone. It's an absolute pleasure again, and I'd love to see you again very, very soon. For those of you who have joined us tonight, thank you. Make sure you visit and subscribe to the YouTube channel, The Business of Property, where you can find our past episodes and more of these sorts of interviews where we interview amazing guests like Simone. If you hit the like button, you get notified when a new episode comes up. So until next time, keep well. See you again soon. Bye, Simone. Bye, everyone. Ciao, ciao.
Bye.